The October 12th, 2021 meeting of the Carlynton School District Board of Directors is called to order. Dr. Kreider, you haven't led the pledge in a long, long time. Would you like to lead it for us tonight? My honor. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Tesoro.
Present.
Director Simpson.
Here.
Director Apple.
Here.
Director Frank.
Here.
Director O'Brien.
She's not able to be here tonight.
Director Zaletsky.
She is not able to be here tonight.
Director Pushkar. Here. Director Honchon.
He is not able to be here tonight.
Director Schreiber.
Here. I'll now turn to Dr. Kreider for the Finance Committee report.
Absolutely. I'll turn things over to Mr. Bealby, who will work through two worksheets that all board members have in front of them and are also made available to the public.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight I have these two worksheets that you've seen before. I thought this was a perfect opportunity tonight that we have 1 month of school in. We really haven't talked a lot about this current year and the budget and where we are. So tonight we can just go over this really quickly to show you, once again, introduce you to the report and what's involved on it. So if you look at the first report, which is the landscape report, basically what this one is, once again, this is just our overview based on our object codes, the 100s, the 200s, the 300s. So basically we're looking at strictly just all the salaries, all the benefits, all the tech services. So what it does is it's taking every one of our 100 accounts, putting them into one, just so that we can have an idea of what are we spending on certain items. So it's easier for us to evaluate whenever we say, well, how are we doing on supplies? Instead of going in and saying, looking at each individual one, we can say, well, overall, if you look on this one right here, we budgeted $1,025,842. As of right now, we've spent $350 on supplies, and we have a remaining balance of $564. One thing that I did add on here that I did not have on prior to this meeting was I added the encumbrances, and I thought that was really important for you guys to really understand, what money has been actually allocated out and spent out. Because I could say to you, especially when we get to near the end of the year, if you look at this and say, okay, the budget's $30,879,000. If you just look at what we spent, the 4.645, you're going to say, wow, we still have quite a bit of money, but you don't know in the background that we have POs out there that we've already obligated $1.7 million. So I added this on. I think it's important. It's a nice tool to really give us a good picture of where the district is at any point at the time. So when you look at the expenditures, basically there's nothing glaring that's out of the ordinary. If you see like under the 300s, we do have $1 million that is allocated out for POs. And a lot of that is our services that we have for our special education students. A lot of it is the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, their OT, their PT, their Pathfinder School. So a lot of those are in there. So what I tried to get each of our administrators to do is let's look out into the future of what you're going to spend. Let's put those POs in, even if it's going to make us look to the point, and you'll see on the next sheet, that we're exceeding our budget, but that's going to give us a better idea as myself as a business manager and them as administrators of how much flexibility do I really have when it comes to purchasing any new items or anything like that. So this is I think it's going to be a good tool for you as a board to see where we are. I will be able to produce this pretty much every meeting that we want. We can look at it every finance meeting. We can look at it on a quarterly basis. It's really up to you how often you want to see this information in this type of a detail. The treasurer's report that you get, kind of, it resembles the format in some ways, but it's not exactly the same. It gives you the same information, but I think this is an easier process to understand and to read. So that's the expenditures. Like I said, we spent 21% of our budget. That includes all the encumbrances that we have outstanding at 1.7. So right now, we're good shape. So even though we've only been through school 1 month, we actually do have 3 years of the fiscal year that has actually, or 3 months of the fiscal year that's actually has been completed. Revenues. Once again, I broke it down between the local, state, federal, and other sources. The local revenues, as you can see here, the taxes that we've collected so far for the first 3 months of the fiscal year, we've collected 78% of our budget. The majority of that, and we can actually switch over to the second page of this, you can see is our real estate collections. In the first 3 months, we've collected 88% of the taxes that were put in Crafton, 85%, I'm sorry, in Carnegie, 85% of Crafton, and 89% in Rothland Farms. So of the taxes that we have put out, we've collected basically 87% of it in the first 3 months, which is really a great testament. And it's a great opportunity for the district too to have that money early, so that we can have options to be able to invest that money, to be able to take this taxpayer money and not just use it for paying out the expenditures and everything, but to also take an opportunity to gain some money on it, to supplement the money that is put in there. So real estate is expected to be, in the first 3 months, being high. Earned income, it always hits towards the end of the fiscal year. I know throughout the year I kept going through this with you, saying, you know, we're exceeded our real estate taxes. Earned income, I'm still kind of worried about, you know, we're not going to hit it. But overall, by the time we came to the end of the fiscal year, we actually and we exceeded the earned income also. So this is just a tool to be able to see, you know, where we are as far as our collections. So when you go back to the first page, 75% of the budget is local revenue that's been collected. You're going to see that money first, and it usually is, you know, what happens every year. State revenue, we're only at 16%, but the state, they space out their subsidies that they send to us. But the only requirements for them to give us any money up front is our property tax allocation and our Ready to Learn grant. Those two have been paid to us in full. And then the basic education subsidy and the special ed subsidy, I believe it's a cycle of every 3 to 4 months that we receive an allocation of that. And then with the federal, as you can see, we've only collected 4% of the federal. A lot of that, we're in the process now, and it usually takes until about September for you to go through the process of identifying your Title I, Title II, and Title III, Title IV allocations, budget it, say how we're going to spend it, send it to the state for approval. Once we get that approval from the state, then we can start spending it. Once we start spending it, then they start sending us the money periodically. So looking at this right now, the way that the money's flowing in the first 3 months, it's flowing exactly how it should be. Local revenue coming in, state a little bit, federal is not as much. And over the next few months, you're going to see where it's going to start shifting. We're going to start getting less local revenue, more of the state and federal. So that's this form right here. Do you have any questions, any comments, any concerns? Is it something that, are you comfortable with the way it's laid out? Does it make sense? I think that this is this document here is a good one to just give you the overview. The next spreadsheet that I have for you, this one here is more of a in detail, where it breaks it down by each different function group. So you have your regular programs, your special ed, your vocational ed, your non-pubs. So this tool, this one here is really a good tool for myself, Dr. Kreider, administrators, to be able to look at the areas and say, where are the issues that we're facing right now? Is it something that is a budgeting issue that we either overlook some items and we need to consider that for future budgeting purposes? I use this also to say, for instance, if you look at the 1100s, 700s, you say we're at 584% over budget. Granted, the budget was only a 1,100, but something like that would cause me to open up those accounts, look at it and say, okay, that makes sense. We purchased this. For instance, this one here was a wireless update that we did at the high school. It wasn't something that was budgeted, but it was something that we were able to do with some of the ESSER's money. And that's one thing when you look at these. There's a few accounts in here that are over budget right now. The ESSER's money is in here, the expenditures. So what I'm thinking that I might want to do is, if this is a report that I'm going to give to you on a periodic basis, I think what I might do is take the ESSER's money, back it out, put it into a different spreadsheet so that this will stay true to the actual budget. And then you'll also have a sheet, because I think that Dr. Kreider and Director Schreiber, I think we both all said that we want to give updates periodically on ESSER's too. So I think that will give us a true picture too, because some of these, as I said, as you go through it, you're going to see that we're over budget. Is ESSER's money that we've already started spending. So, at any time, I can account for any of these issues. If you see something, you're saying, well, why is this, 1,400% over budget? If you look at the 2,500, and it's kind of something that I was joking with Dr. Kreider about, is that when I was so looking into this budget and looking at everyone's budget, that I actually overlooked part of my own budget for my own department. So, when it comes to the point, where I was joking with some of our business people that, the money's out, we're not going to be able to work on it. But no, that's just. But that identifies, so it allows me to see right away, oh, there's something wrong. I just, it was something I did or whatever. So that's where you're going to start seeing, now that we're in October, the budget transfers. So with the budget transfers, you're going to start seeing where I'm going to be able to right size the budget so that we were able to keep the budget. We'll have an idea. We know where we are with the current budget. By the time we get done with the year, we'll have our adjusted budget, and then we'll see, if we'll be able to adjust the final budget or the next year budget with that. So that's this report. This one, I don't know if this is something that you'd be interested in seeing at any time. Like I said, this is more of a tool for myself, Dr. Kreider, administrators, to really focus down onto the different areas. The administrators, they're not going to get this type. They'll get just their section with their expenditures, so that we're going to really work on, over the next year, of having the administrators be more involved in their budget, more accountable for their budget, to the point where I want them to be able to, just on their own, look at the system, say, something's not right here. Why am I over here? And say, well, look, we coded this incorrectly. And that really is. When you get them invested, I know they have so much else to do, and they say that, we don't have time, but it takes maybe 5-10 minutes of their day. I'll have all the reports for them. They just have to review it, look through it, and it's a really nice tool that I've used at other districts, and the principals actually enjoy it more because we are giving them more of a say. Well, I'm not just strictly saying, at the high school, you have this much money to spend it, how you will. That I want them to see how they're spending it, so that they can see different things. So that's this report for that. Any questions in this report?
So with the landscape, this one, like how frequently frequently are you going to present us with?
It's really, I mean, it's
Well,
up
how
to you as a
frequently do you
board.
think it makes sense for us to be able to compare or track how these?
I can do this monthly. It's not a very hard budget. I mean, a hard report to put together. That's something that we can do monthly, we can do quarterly with, at the end of it, every week.
I think, I mean, to me, quarterly sounds like it'd be fine. I'd just be interested in seeing how it flows through and, you know.
And this is something that we could actually add into the weekend review. Just say, put a little section in financials. So let's say there is a question in between board meetings and, you have a question about something that, if you want to bring it out to the whole group, then I can put something on there for the group to look at.
Keith, would you want to put this in the monthly report that you create? It's a public document. Is that?
I can. I mean, it's something that I can add at the end of the treasurer's report. Because, no, I agree. The treasurer's report, when you look at it, we're pulling actual reports from the software, which at times it's a lot more technical. That's very easy for me to just add this as a report.
Yeah, thank you.
And then what we can do is every quarterly, we can just say, okay, let's have a discussion. Say, okay, these are things that I've noticed that are happening, or maybe it's something that you all see and say, well, can you explain this? Every month it seems to be going up and up and up, and nothing's happening. And that will be good because it might be something that we missed, or and it's really going to hold me a lot more accountable too to say, this is what's happening. So I have a better picture of what you're thinking with financial system. That's the whole point is, and we've said it right from day one, is that transparency is huge for me. So I want you guys to understand what's in the budget, how what's happening with the budget. There's nothing worse than for me to hide something in here, not tell you, then all of a sudden the auditor comes and says, hey, guess what? We have this and this, and you look at me and say, well, you can say, it's been rosy this whole time. What happened now? That's not. I will never.
So Keith, on your earlier point about the expenditures capturing Esther's related expenditures, but the income not capturing Esther's income, does the board understand what Keith is proposing to do, and is everybody okay with? He's going to create a separate reconciliation
Yeah.
I think
document.
that's the way to do it.
Yeah,
I
makes
think
sense.
Because that's,
Because otherwise it's easy.
that's not all the time money. I mean, it's nice, but
Right.
No, I think that's a good idea to do. Also, Esther's money probably won't start flowing to us probably for another 3-4 months.
Right.
It's a little bit different than previous Esther's or other grants that we get where we submit what we spent, they send us the money back for it. They're trying to pace it out over a 3-year period. So, but that absolutely I can do that. I can do a form that's almost the same way as this format here, but strictly make this Esther's expenditures. And I think that wouldn't be too bad to do at all. So I'd be more than happy to do that. The only other thing that I have, if there's no more questions about these, is that, believe it or not, starting next month, we have to start thinking about the budget for next year. So there's some decisions that we need to start looking at. Director Frank and I had a discussion today. We meet once or twice a month. Just going through, topics of like what are we going to do with the budget? How are we going to produce the budget? How are we going to bring it to the board? And one of the first things that we need to have you start thinking about, and we'll discuss this more in November, is I'm going to give you a timeline. So on this timeline, it's going to have key dates that we have to hit as a board, key dates that I have to hit as a administrator for PDE purposes. And also, it's going to be a timeline on there that's going to have the administrators of when they're going to be meeting with us and when they need to have their portion of the budget completed. But for me to do this timeline, we have to think about 2 things. The first one is we traditionally approve the budget in the end of June, or first meeting in June. A lot of school districts have started to shift that into May. It makes it a little bit more of an aggressive budget processing. You might just have to start it a little bit earlier to do. But what that does is it allows us to go through the process more thoroughly, where there's really no gaps. At this time, we do a lot of presentations in January and maybe early February, where we talk about the preliminary budget, talk about exceptions, different things like that. And then we really don't talk about anything, until probably April, May, when we get to this, where we do May. It's going to allow us to start in January of coming and doing a different portion of the budget with you during these finance meetings. We can walk through it. We can, if it's, I know it's the interest of several that has approached me and said, can you teach us what goes into the budgeting? And it's something that, I have no problems, doing. We can take parts of it and say, okay, this is what we've done. Today, let's look at the revenues. This is how we do this, and this is what we look at. And, we can start that feedback where we really get to that point of, when it comes time for us to approve that budget, there should be no doubt amongst any of you of, what's in that budget, what's going, why are we doing this, and it's going to make it a easier decision for you to make on approving of a budget. So we would need to start to think that, is it something that we're willing to go to that last meeting in May? What that also does gives us the ability of having 2 additional meetings in June. If for some reason something comes up that, with the COVID, the new initiatives of the ASRs, or different things that came up, this gives us that time to say, all right, we wanted to do it in May. We've already followed the guidelines of posting it for the 30 days and everything. So if we push it into June for more discussion, if there is questions on some things, then we have that time where right now, especially if we go to that last one, we just have a 2-week period, sometimes only a week, where we have to plan a schedule, a special meeting, and really quickly have to get it pulled together by the time we get to that end of the budget season. So that's something that we don't have to think about tonight. I mean, it's just something that, we can discuss. We can,
I thought we do a preliminary budget in May. Is that not what we've been doing?
we do a proposed final budget in May, but what that would happen is it actually be moved up into early May or in April, most probably likely in April.
And I thought the historic problem is that the state doesn't release their funding information in time for us to accurately plan.
Right. The state's pretty close with their assumptions. They're not always, but yeah, you're right. That's one of the downfalls of that is that we have a pretty good idea by the time you get to May of where we are as far as
our internal expenditures.
and even for some of the revenues for the state. We know always that the state is always going to be flat. They're always going to give us what we have, and they've been pretty good about saying, when we have our meetings, our budget meetings, they're telling us, well, the state's looking at about a 2% increase. That's a good increase, to put onto your budget. Or if they see that, there's an opportunity that we're going to get more funding for this, or if they're going to take away from transportation. So we have a pretty good idea, but that you're right, that if you want to get the accurate for the revenues, which you still are never going to totally get it, because a lot of times the budget doesn't get approved until the end of June anyways for the state. And, we're just going with our preliminary numbers. So that's absolutely open for discussion.
I don't think anybody will argue against it earlier.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think what it does, it allows us to really focus in on the budget without any gaps in between conversations to identify where's the revenue, what are the expenditures, give the historic, use these documents throughout the course to help build the historical picture of how we've been allocating resources and what the revenues are coming in the timelines. If we can get it done in May, I think that's a good timeline.
And I really do believe that the majority of the districts are starting to try to get it done in May, just so that you can get it done. And then what that does also on our part is it allows us to get everything ready, purchase orders ready and set to go out, July 1st. Right now there is a little bit of a delay in getting things done, but I'm more than willing to do the aggressive if you're willing to do it. Like I said, Dr. Kreider, we talked about it. Director Frank, we talked about it, and he's good, right? You're good with that? So that's something that I think that we can try. And if it doesn't, if it falls, not fall, but if we see that we're running into situations, then we can extend it out. We've already followed all the guidelines of posting, so and then we can adjust it the following year. And then the second thing is that there's two options that we have to do in January. One is we either have to post a preliminary budget and seek approval to go for a referendum for exceptions, which involves several different postings of things, the posting of the budget, advertising, getting approvals, or we have that option that we can say we can pass that referendum that says that we will not raise taxes above the index. So what it basically says is that it just excludes us from applying for our exceptions, which we did get exceptions a couple years ago, but the way that the state is right now, really are not going to qualify for exceptions right now. We did just get notified that our index for this year is 4.2%. Last year was 3.7. So 4.2, that's actually more than if we would have gotten the exceptions onto the 3.7 this year. So that's another thing that we would need to think about for me to do the timeline, because then we're still going to build a preliminary budget, and that's why I said we're going to go through that whole process, but it's not going to put as much of a pressure of us having to post it, advertise it, come to you for 2 or 3 different motions over a period of time. We can do the referendum in December, put it into PD, and we're done with what we have to do until we start worrying about the proposed final budget. So that's just something that, if you feel that we're going to need to go for the exceptions, then we'll go through that process. But that I can make 2 different calendars, and then we can decide during November's board meeting which way we want to go, and then we'll say, okay, we're all in agreement that we're just going to do the referendum. Okay, we'll use this timeline. And we can
For
do
the
that.
board members that have been around, I think we did exceptions several years because we needed to. I think in our conversations in the last 6 months, because of the ESSER's money, I don't think
Well,
we're probably going to need to.
unknown, but
Fair.
I think maybe what you're referring to is the fact that there for a number of years, and Director Cesaro remembered how the tasers was jumping like a lot. And it's still been increasing rate, but not quite as much.
Not quite as much. It's starting to level out a little bit.
Well,
So
let's hope.
right, and that was the whole point of the exceptions, was to try to help the districts to bridge that gap a little bit of for the PCERS costs. So that's why it is actually getting harder and harder to get these exceptions, just because it is starting to level off. And when you look year to year, especially with the COVID, last year there was no way we were going to be able to get it. Basically, to get an exception, you have to spend more than you did the previous year, or less than the previous year, it's the other way, I'm sorry, more than the previous year. And then they look at it and they say, well, yeah, you could use some more money to cover these costs, whether it be for retirement purposes or for special ed costs. So.
If you and Dr. Credit want to bring us a recommendation in November and we can look at the numbers, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my recommendation would be to, with the index set where it is at 4.2, I can't see us looking to go above that. The preliminary budget that we put together is historically has been numbers put together that we change quite drastically between the preliminary and the proposed final. There's a huge difference between where those two are. So I think my recommendation right now would be to move forward with the referendum. We can move forward with that.
But absolutely, what I'll do is I'll do both calendars, our timelines, and then we can decide. And we can approve whatever one at the November board meeting. So we can discuss it actually again in more detail in the November board meeting, or in the finance meeting, and then when it comes time for the board meeting, then we will know which one timeline to approve. Okay, I'm good with that too. The only other thing I have is just to give you an update. The audit is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. It has to happen in the next couple of weeks. I haven't got a timeline from them yet, but they were already here and did a lot of the preliminary work, so they're only going to be here for a couple of days. The only thing it does is that it puts a little pressure to get our annual financial return done by the 10/31, this October 31st deadline that the state has imposed on it. The only luxury that we have, which we don't try not to use it, is that we have a built-in 1 month grace period. So because they know that auditors don't have time allowed to get everyone done by that December 30 or October 31st. So that's all I have for now. If future topics, if there's anything that you want me to go over, give me a couple weeks in advance, notice I can prepare, throw questions or whatever. Like I said, this meeting should be one of those, back and forth and let's just discuss, and that's all I have.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add from the finance end of things is we have started to completed a lot of the process for the ESSER 2 funding and going through that application, which is quite extensive. We're at the point where we're building the preliminary budget for that to get that submitted, and then we'll start to take a look at the ESSER 3. And as far as that process, what we do is look to get a larger dialogue in on one, just to review the ESSER 1, the ESSER 2. I think Keith did a real nice job at the last Finance Committee meeting with overview of that, and then take a look at what the specific needs are of the district as we start to take a look at the ESSER 3 money and start to build that and get that into place. But I think we're in a real good spot. They set some very aggressive timelines they have soft deadlines in place for the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 process to be completed. I think they're unreasonable soft dates. I don't think there's many schools that have ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 completed at this time. Because I think districts are making conscientious efforts with the amount of money that's been provided to districts. They want to make sure that they are allocating it responsibly and putting it towards good cause. So that's where we'll take that next step and make sure we're doing that with fidelity. So, that's all I have.
Thanks, John. Director Frank, as treasurer, any thoughts, comments, topics you want to discuss?
No, and I support getting the budget done earlier and consolidating the process so we're doing it in one kind of set of meetings as opposed to that 3-month break that we have in there.
Okay. Any other board member have any finance topics?
I have a citizen's question. So the budget and everything that's available for public review, transparent, but the ESSER's money, does the public have a chance to review that? Just come up with some needs and between the school district and the federal government?
So as far as the process, the ESSER 2 does not have any built-in requirements to solicit feedback from stakeholders at large. It allows the district to allocate that money independently. The ESSER 3, which comes through the American Rescue Plan, that does have language put into place where it does require the district to assemble a group of stakeholders to review the money and to help provide input on how it will be allocated. So that'll be our next step then with the ESSER 3. We have provided preliminary information as far as how much money is in each of those. I think the ESSER 2 is 1.8 million and ESSER 3 is 3.7 million, I think, in that neighborhood. There are also some additional, what do they call it, add-ons or set-asides. There's set-asides that are coming out, even more money that we're learning about as far as these set-asides. Some that have to be spent for after-school programming, some that have to be spent for summer programming, and closing achievement gaps. And each of those have specific money amounts to those as well. So as we brainstorm on the ideas where we need the funding, some of those go into the different categories, which is a challenge to keep separate how we're going to meet each of the targets. But yeah, there will be a public aspect to it also.
Was there a dollar amount for the ESSER one?
ESSER one was about $423,000, I think. And much of that money, that came out, ESSER one came out in March of 2020, shortly after the pandemic had hit. The state recognized that districts are going to need money. A lot of that $420,000 we spent towards equipping our students with laptop computers, upgrading our technology services, and yeah, all kinds of PPE and cleaning supplies, products of that nature that help us get through, be able to move forward.
Thank you.
Keith, maybe you could send Director Tesaro that presentation you put together last month that outlines the ESSER.
Absolutely. One of the requirements on the ESSER 3 is that we do need to make presentations on it of the expenditures, and there are more guidelines in it about where we have to actually evaluate the gaps. You know, so there's going to be goals, and there's going to be different things in there that's a lot more involved. This ESSER 3, as Dr. Kreider said, is more towards the learning loss and the achievement gaps that we have, and you know, whereas the first two are more of, let's just get the districts through the pandemic so that the pandemic doesn't cause undue stress on the districts, where the biggest money, that's what we're going to have for the ESSER 3. So absolutely, I'll send that to you. The ESSER 3, I believe, is also, our budget has to be on the website and updated on the website, so it'll always be available for anyone to review.
One of the changes Keith has made is putting more complete, more thorough financial documents in one report as opposed to Any other board questions? Any other citizen questions? Shall we adjourn? I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, you guys have